Our best work was never recorded, you know. We were performers in Liverpool, Hamburg, and around the dance halls, you know, and what we generated was fantastic when we played straight rock. And there was nobody to touch us in Britain, you know. Now Brian put us in suits and all that, and we made it very, very big, but we sold out, you know.
And away they go.
Legend has it, in 1954, Liverpool housewife Mona Best pawned her jewelry and bet the money on racehorse Never Say Die, a 33-1 long shot to win the Epstein Derby.
Never Say Die, a 33-1 shot. First American-bred entry to win the Derby since 1881.
She jumped for joy. She ran round the kitchen 6 times. You know, she did cartwheels. I've won the money to get my house.
Best used the winnings to purchase her dream home, a 15-room Victorian house located at 8 Hayman's Green in the West Derby section of Liverpool.
It was like this massive mansion. It was a total adventure to us.
You walk through an empty house of this size and your footsteps echo.
In 1959, she converted part of the house into the Casbah Coffee Club, a members-only club for her teenage sons, Rory and Pete, to hang out and enjoy rock and roll music with their friends.
And of course there was an army of volunteers which helped.
There was Ken Brown, myself, Pete, Bernie Grindley, Dougie Brown, Dave Hughes, everybody doing different jobs.
With only 2 weeks to go before the grand opening, they were desperate to find a band. George Harrison offered a solution.
George basically turned around and said, look, I think I might be able to solve this particular problem. I've played with a couple of guys who aren't doing anything at the present moment. Who did they turn out to be? John Lennon and Paul McCartney.
They came down, had a look at the club, and they liked it, and they said, it's great, you know, in fact, we'll give you a hand with it. And sure enough to the word, they did. You know, as the ceiling was done by John Lennon. The Rainbow Room ceiling, that was done by Paul. The Aztec Room, the ceiling there was done by John Lennon.
In 1956, John Lennon formed his first band, the Quarrymen. A year later, he met 15-year-old Paul McCartney for the first time.
A mutual friend brought him to see my group called the Quarrymen. And we met and we talked after the show. I thought he had talent, and I turned around to him right then on first meeting and said, do you want to join the group? And I think he said yes the next day. Now, George came through Paul. The person I actually picked as my partner was Paul.
One by one, the other Quarrymen quit until Lennon, McCartney, and Harrison were left as a drummerless trio. That made it hard to get gigs, and the few places they could play didn't allow rock and roll.
We used to show up at gigs, those early gigs, and the promoter would say, where's your drummer? He'd say, the rhythms and the guitars, and just hold your nerve while he just panicked a bit. Just hope he bought it.
It was around this time that Stuart Sutcliffe entered the picture.
Stuart was John's friend mainly from art college. Stuart was a very good painter.
Stuart and Lennon became roommates and very close friends. Stu took over managing the group and helped them get gigs, including negotiating terms with Mona Best for their residency at the Casbah Coffee Club.
Till the fateful day, you know, August the 29th, 1959, and the doors opened to the Casbah. It was a fantastic night.
And the whole setup was wonderful for an aspiring young rock and roller. To have that on their doorstep.
Word spread as the Casbah membership swelled to capacity. The Quarrymen were hired as the house band for 60 shillings a night. 300 Liverpool teenagers packed the club for the opening as the Casbah Coffee Club became the place to be for young people who wanted to socialize and listen to rock and roll music with their friends.
The girlfriends used to come, Cynthia used to be down there, Dot used to be there, Stu used to be there.
The famous stories where he sold his painting to John Moore.
So the question was, what do you do with 75 quid?
He was going to spend it on new materials, new canvases and whatever. And they were sitting over there.
John and I kind of gave him quite a sort of persuasive argument that the best thing to do, obviously, was to buy this Hofner bass, which he did. He went and did that.
They went on auditions and entered talent contests, but not much happened. They continued to have drummer problems and were starting to get a reputation for being a bum band.
And we were crummy. The band was horrible, you know. We were really an embarrassment.
In order to make a fresh start, they would have to find a permanent drummer, change the name of the group, and leave the country. Promoter Alan Williams had been having success sending Liverpool rock and roll groups to play at clubs in Hamburg, Germany.
So Alan Williams came to us and said, okay lads, you can have this job in Germany. The only problem is you've got to be 5 people. He's asked for a 5-piece band. At that point, Paul was the drummer because all the drummers didn't show up.
And then we had all sorts of different drummers all the time. People who owned drum kits were far and few between. It was an expensive item, and they were usually idiots, you know. We got Pete Best just because we needed a drummer the next day to go to Hamburg.
So Paul knew that I'd been playing drums. He said, Pete, you know, we got the offer to go to Germany. So he said, "Are you interested?" I said, "Yeah, very much so." Which lad of 18 gets the chance to go to Germany and play rock and roll music with a rock band?
The group that was playing Derry and the Seniors, featuring Howie Casey, the lead, he sent me a letter saying, "Look, Alan, we've got a good thing going over here for all the Liverpool groups. But if you send that bum group, the Beatles, over to Hamburg, you're going to louse it all up. For God's sake, don't send them."
Williams did send them, driving all the way from Liverpool to Hamburg in his van to save money. The Beatles would make their start in a rundown bar called the Indra, about a half-mile walk from the main drag.
The rumor was around, there's a new band coming over from England. That was 1960 on the 16th of August.
Where are we sleeping? Right. We'll head over the corner to the Bambino, right, which was a second-rate flea pit. Paul and I sort of looked at one another and sort of grimaced, and it was like, well, let's get on with it.
The band came out with Stuart first, going up on stage, and he had those glasses on with the sunnies on top, and he looked real good. This must be the leader of the band. So that was the first impression. Then everybody plugged in, and I just started playing.
The Beatles played 7-hour sets, 7 days a week. Paul McCartney told Pete Best to crank up the beat, so Best went atomic and developed the Atom beat. Club owner Bruno Casbah yelled at him to make show, so the stage act got wild and the Beatles exploded in popularity.
The audience was growing and growing and growing, and of course Saturday nights in there, Sunday night, Friday night, you couldn't move.
Soon they were the hottest act on the Hamburg scene and attracting loyal fans and drawing the attention of rival club owners.
I was just knocked out. It was just incredible. Never seen a band like that.
They projected that rocker image, particularly John, because he played this young, tough Marlon Brando type. And I remember that, and I was actually afraid of him. I never felt quite comfortable in John's presence because he had the tendency to be ironic.
The ones who became our real friends were the ones who are known now as Klaus Bormann, Jürgen Vollmann, and Astrid, who took all the famous photographs of us at that period.
I've never seen boys that were so attractive before. My vision of attraction, what a boy should look like when he plays this kind of music. I couldn't believe it.
The Beatles' new German friends would have a strong influence on the group. Stu had Astrid cut his hair in the Epstein style that was popular with the local art school students. During the visit to Liverpool, Astrid styled George's hair the same way. Jürgen styled Paul and John's hair during a visit they made to see him in Paris. And with that, the Beatle haircut was born. As for Pete, he kept his rockin' look. The Beatles would make their first record backing Tony Sheridan on an album's worth of material, including the hit single, My Bonnie, a top 40 record in Germany. Stu attended the session but didn't play. He then quit the Beatles, enrolled in Hamburg College of Art, and got engaged to Astrid. After 4 months in Germany, the Beatles returned to England to play at the Casbah Coffee Club and show off their new sound. Powered by Pete Best on drums, these weren't the same old Quarrymen. Fans were stunned at the improvement.
Playing in Germany had made them into such a tight group and everything like that. Every member of the group would have been tight. So they all came, all 4 of them back, leaving Stuart behind, but all 4 came back as exceptional.
When they came back from Hamburg, they were red hot. I mean, nobody could touch them.
Bill was from Hamburg, and they all said, "You speak good English."
We came back, leather jackets and jeans and funny hair, smacking shower, which went down quite well.
On December 27, 1960, the Beatles were one of several bands playing Litherland Town Hall. When they took the stage and started blasting out their new hard rock sound, the unsuspecting audience went wild. Beatlemania was born.
The moment the Beatles struck up and did their stomping, everybody, every kid froze, and then they all run to the stage and started screaming.
The Beatles instantly became the most talked about group on the Liverpool music scene. Word spread and they were offered a permanent residence at the Cavern Club in downtown Liverpool.
The first I ever heard about the Beatles was when Pete Best's mother rang me up and said, you should know about this group called the Beatles. They're very good, they played for me, they're very good indeed.
A kid had gone into Brian's record store and had asked for My Bonnie.
And so he went down the street and checked us out.
I hadn't had anything to do with pop management of pop artists before that day that I went down to the Cavern Club and heard the Beatles play. And I was immediately struck by their music, their beats.
That's what I want.
Pete playing the bass drum was really loud. I mean, it was straight, boom, boom, straight forwards all the time on the bass drum.
Fans would stand in line for days just to get a chance to see the Beatles. Brian Epstein signed on to manage them.
And even afterwards, when I met them, I was struck again by their personal charm. And it was there that really it all started.
When Pete Best joined the Beatles, they were a bum band that nobody wanted. Less than a year later, they were the most popular band in 2 different cities and 2 different countries.
Mean, moody, and magnificent. Pete Best.
At the time, the Beatles sound was Pete Best's bass drum. All the drummers were copying him.
Pete initially in Liverpool was the most popular member of the Beatles, particularly with the girl fans. And whenever the Beatles used to appear, all the girls used to shout and scream for Pete.
As Best's popularity soared, Lennon, McCartney, and Harrison were sometimes ignored. Jealousy began creeping into the act.
Clash of personalities, well, probably that may be it, because Peter did have a terrific fan club, compared to the others.
Many fans began referring to the group as Pete Best and the Beatles.
I remember the Cavern that used to tell, Lennon and McCartney and Harrison to sit down so they could see Pete.
Best was given a solo spot during every performance, and at one point, Pete and his drum kit were placed in the front of the stage with Lennon, McCartney, and Harrison forced to perform from the back. That summer, an article in the Mercy Beat raved about the musically authoritative and physically magnetic Beatles. Pete Best was singled out for his mean, moody magnificence. John, Paul, and George were never mentioned.
We found out afterwards jealousy was creeping into the act.
George decided Pete had to go. Soon Paul was in agreement. But to make it happen, they would have to convince John Lennon. In early 1962, Brian Epstein succeeded in getting George Martin to sign the Beatles to EMI's Parlophone record label.
Brian had been to every record company in the country and hadn't gotten anywhere with it. He saw me because I had a reputation at that time for being rather screwball and rebellious, and I would take any nutty thing like the Beatles.
So please, love me do.
We were delighted because we knew that we had a recording contract. We'd been told we were signed, sealed and delivered.
I was looking for something original because I didn't want to do one of the oldies, and Love Me Do was the best song that I could find from them at that time.
George Martin said the main reason he decided to sign the Beatles was Brian Epstein's unwavering belief that they were going to be famous. An exciting Epstein telegrammed the Mercy Beat with the news of the band's record deal. When the Mercy Beat announced the story on its front page, the only Beatles shown was Pete.
By then we were pretty sick of Pete Best. The reason he got in the group in the first place was because he had to have a drummer. We knew of this guy who was living at his mother's house who had a club in it, and we were always going to dump him when we could find a decent drummer.
I walked into Brian's office and I could tell that Brian wasn't a normal, cool, calm, placid Brian, to be quite honest. He was quite agitated, he was fidgety. Talked round the subject for a while, and then he just basically turned around and said, Pete, he said, I really don't know how to turn around and tell you this. He said, but I will. And he said, in short, the boys want you out. And it's already been arranged that Ringo will join the band on Saturday. And that was the bombshell.
Love me do. Oh, love me
do. Mona Best had written to Granada TV requesting they come to Liverpool to do a piece on the Beatles. On August 22nd, they came to record the Cavern debut of Ringo's Star, her son's replacement.
There was a few people there who were shouting, Ringo never, Pete Best forever.
It was quite violent, the demonstration. And George Harrison had a big black eye. I said to George, "What happened to you?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, someone punched me in the eye because of Pete."
We stepped out of what was the dressing room into this dark tunnel, and some guy just butted me right in the eye. That was a bad day. And then I walked under a bus, got hit by a double-deck bus.
It was... just couldn't believe it. We just couldn't believe it.
I couldn't believe what was happening.
And Ringo was petrified. And he said, "Oh, I think I've done the wrong thing here. I'm not going to enjoy this at all, you know."
Ringo Starr had been the drummer for Rory Storm and the Hurricanes. They played the same clubs as the Beatles and were friends of the band. As for Pete Best, he was never told why he was fired. Best had helped take the Beatles from his basement to the verge of superstardom, and no drummer in their history, including Ringo Starr, would put in as much time as Pete did performing live with the band.
But nothing was ever mentioned. There was no acknowledgements.
Nobody said, "Sorry, Pete," or "We'll talk to you later about it," or "It was business," or nothing?
No, just stony silence.
Yeah, and from the time that you got let go to the time that... Did you know Ringo at all? Had you met him before?
Sure, yeah. Ringo and I were very good friends. Yeah.
So from the time you got let go to the time that they just became an unbelievable success, what amount of time was that?
Oh, basically they had a record in the English charts within a month or so of me being kicked out. And after that, it became history. Everyone knows about it.
Love me do.
You know, why I joined the Beatles was because they were the best band in Liverpool.
For their first single, George Martin had listened to both Pete Best and Ringo Starr before deciding to stick with 32-year-old studio veteran Andy White on the drums. When the Beatles recorded their follow-up single, Please Please Me, they insisted that Ringo be allowed to play. He did, and it became their first #1. The Beatles then recorded their debut album in a day. It went straight to #1 and stayed there for 7 months, only to be replaced by the Beatles' second album, which held the top spot for another 5 months.
We're now a big band that when we went, woo, and shook our heads, you know, everyone went mad.
The Beatles did it all. They wrote their own songs, they played their own instruments, they controlled their own image, and they were becoming a phenomenon unlike anything seen in history.
Today, the Beatles return from Sweden to be greeted by what the British press are calling Beatlemania.
In February 1964, the Beatles touched down in America, already the #1 group in the country. It was pandemonium as thousands of Beatlemaniacs and dozens of reporters flooded JFK Airport in New York City to greet them.
No, we need money first.
What do you think of the comment that you're nothing but a bunch of British Elvis Presley?
Oh, it's not true, it's not true.
Question.
Do you want to get a haircut at all?
No,
thanks. I had one yesterday.
Music does to these people.
We don't know, really. We'll form another group and be managers.
The Beatles!
Hysteria over the Beatles swept through America. They had the top 5 songs in the country and 14 different songs on the Billboard Pop chart at the same time. The tidal wave of Beatlemania carried them next to Australia, where they had the top 6 songs in the country.
The crowd is surging forward. You can't see an inch of space. The crowd's going really mad. It's absolutely unbelievable.
They used us as an excuse to go mad. The world did, and then blamed it on us.
By 1965, the Beatles were movie stars and recording superstars with 20 different songs hitting #1 somewhere in the world. Yet, as a live act, their playing was getting steadily worse.
We had to reduce an hour or 2 hours playing to 20 minutes and go on and repeat the same 20 minutes every night.
We're playing really bad. You know, I was playing just shit.
The Beatles music died then. That's why we never improved, you know. As musicians, we killed ourselves then to make it, and that was the end of it.
It's gone downhill performance, because we can't develop when no one can hear us.
The youngsters came there to see the Beatles, and the whole show was based upon producing hysteria. They ranted, they fainted, some pulled their hair out. One father brought a child who was epileptic, and the child had an epileptic fit. Some girls, after the performance, kissed the stage, and some went up and kissed the very seats in which the Beatles had sat. And then these girls went into a coma. It was, as some people say, unbelievable.
The Palace of the Queen has lived through many historic events, and it's our privilege today to witness one of the most earth-shaking. The audience outside Buckingham may give you an inkling of what's going on. The Beatles, fresh from an audience with the Queen, they hold medals, indicating they have been made members of the most excellent order of the British Empire.
The Beatles were then summoned to Buckingham Palace to meet the Queen and receive the MBE. Ringo Starr could hardly believe his good fortune.
Ringo Starr, MBE.
I mean, first, you had these guys were your friends, and suddenly they're not your friends. That's tough enough, but to suddenly see them skyrocket like that, not to mention the economics involved in the thing. Now, what does that do to a person?
For a certain amount of time, there was heartache, and there was anger, not bitterness. You know, a lot of people always portray it as bitterness. What I went through was financial embarrassment, stigma because of the way it was handled, things that were said about me. You know, I wasn't a good enough drummer, I was antisocial. You can list them.
What do they say mainly?
Well, you know, drummer wasn't too good, the beat wasn't so hot, you know.
How do you get on with Ringo? Do you talk to Ringo?
Well, I haven't seen Ringo for donkeys years. I used to be good mates of us, you know, before the replacement took place. We're still mates now, like, but I haven't seen him to have a chat with him or anything.
You wake up one morning and you go, that's history. You know, I have too much to live for.
In 1995, the Beatles were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Pete Best and Stu Sutcliffe were not included, nor were they mentioned by any members of the group. 25 years after the breakup of the Beatles, the surviving members reunited for the Beatles Anthology, a documentary series, a set of 3 double albums, and a book focusing on the history of the band as told by the group members themselves. Klaus Voormann was hired and along with Alphonse Kiefer designed the album covers. John Lennon, who was murdered in 1980, was represented through archival clips. Stu Sutcliffe, who died in 1962, was not represented. Also not represented was original member Pete Best, although he did benefit, however, by reportedly earning several $1 million through the sales of Anthology 1.
The involvement with the Beatles Anthology was something which came as a total surprise to me. And it ended up that I was, I think, eventually on 10 tracks. You know, some of the old Decca stuff, some of the stuff which we did at EMI. To me, it's a little bit like, thank you for services rendered in the past.
The project was not without controversy as Pete's face was torn from the cover of Anthology 1, revealing a separate photo of Ringo Starr. He was also artificially replaced by Ringo in the famous 1960 Fairground photo, reportedly at Starr's request. Best would go on to produce his own documentary film and a music album reflecting on the Casbah and his time with the Beatles. The CD, Hayman's Green, featured a portion of the photo torn from Anthology 1. The time the Beatles spent getting started in Germany had a significant influence on John Lennon and the group. The album with the Beatles copied the look of Astrid Kirchher's Hamburg photos at Lennon's request. Klaus Voormann would win a Grammy for designing the cover of the Beatles' Revolver album. He would also design a cover featuring original members Best and Sutcliffe. John Lennon would wear medals belonging to Pete Best's grandfather for the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band photo shoot, and include Stu Sutcliffe among the group of onlookers featured on the cover. Lennon would use one of Jürgen Vollmer's Hamburg photos for the cover of his rock and roll album. And the cover of his final album, Double Fantasy, reminded many of an Astrid and Stu photo from 20 years earlier.
Don't you think the Beatles gave every sodden thing they've got to be the Beatles? That took a whole section of our youth, that whole period. When everybody else was just goofing off, we were working 24 hours a day.
You know, whenever we'd been frustrated in Germany, you know, got a little bit down, you know, we'd always sort of turn around and say, you know, Johnny would basically turn around and say, you know...
When the Beatles were depressed, thinking the group was going nowhere and this is a shitty deal and we're in a shitty dressing room, I say, where are we going, fellas? And they'd go, to the top, Johnny. And I say, where's that, fellas? And they say, to the toppermost of the poppermost. And I say, right. And we'd all sort of cheer up. When I was a Beatle, I thought we were the best fucking group in the goddamn world. And believing that is what made us what we were. Just a matter of time before everybody else caught on.
we always missed the club days because that's when we were playing music. And then later on we became technically efficient recording artists.